Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our Efficiency Squared Paperless Document Management for Microsoft Dynamics NAV webinar. My name is Michael Introvertolo, and I am the Marketing Manager here at Solution Systems. If you take a quick look at the bottom of the screen, you can see our Twitter handle, which is @solution_system. I'd recommend following us as we will be posting more paperless information throughout the day. Today, we're very fortunate to have Doug Bertram with us. Doug is the Regional Sales Manager at Metafile, and he's going to be conducting this overview. So let me go ahead and pass this on over to Doug, and he can get started. Also, at the end of the webinar, time permitting, which should be a little bit of time, we will be able to take some questions. So be ready.
Great, thanks, Michael. Let me make sure I get my screen shared here and make sure I got the right screen shared.
Perfect.
It comes up. Make that a little bigger. And yeah, there we go.
All right, we see it.
All right. Well, as Michael said, my name is Doug Bertram. I'm very pleased to be here with you guys today. Kind of introduce you to how we help companies bring some efficiencies to their process, and with our MetaViewer solution, and it's very tightly integrated with Microsoft Dynamics NAV. So that's the really the focus of the discussion today. Kind of just a little bit of how the presentation will go. I've got a PowerPoint slide here that I kind of go over and kind of spell out what the entire solution can do. And then I've got a virtual machine that I've got a full functioning system all in there. And so we're going to open up the documents and show you an example of something that we do to help bring some of those efficiencies and help companies truly become paperless. And it will be integrated with your Microsoft Dynamics NAV. Historically, I mean, just as a little bit of company background, we've been around since '79, so we've been around for quite a while. The old days, we used to, we started as a report capture system and then really have evolved the solution over time by listening to the needs of our customers. What other value could we integrate into the solution to better help those customers? So those early report capture companies said, I've got all this paper I'd like to get rid of. So we became an imaging system. You could scan documents into the system and very easily find things that in a second or two by typing in what you're looking for. And then those clients said, it'd really be nice if we had we could capture the document as soon as it comes into the organization and then route it around our organization electronically. So we developed our workflow engine for that so that we could control that document as it flows through the organization. And then really, probably the last several years here, some key pieces of development have been on tools to intelligently read documents and extract the data so people don't have to key that information in. And then also our relationship with Microsoft, we've actually really leveraged that relationship to tighten up the integration. Historically, I think we used to integrate with all kinds of different things, and we still have that ability if you have some secondary systems that you would like to have the system talk to. But for the benefits of those folks that are on the line today, we have some very great tight integration with Microsoft Dynamics NAV. And really one of the things that we really developed, and what I'm going to demonstrate today, is our AP automation or invoice processing solution. MetaViewer can actually be used across your enterprise in lots of different ways. But a lot of the new business that we were getting, people said, hey, you know what, I really want to start in this AP automation perspective and then branch out into other areas. So because we were doing so much work in there, rather than build everything from scratch, and we're probably building about 90% of the same things for every company, we developed an AP automation solution called Fast Track that basically is pre-configured. So I can load that solution, and while we're loading it, we're telling it where's your NAV system and those types of things. It gets all launched, and then you've got a working system. And so it really speeds up the implementation, but it's really not intended that that's the way you have to do things. It's just really a better way to kind of get started really quickly, and then we can start walking your invoices through that solution and decide how do we need to adjust our system to fit your business practices, or maybe your business practices you want to adjust a little bit to fit in MetaViewer. Typically, it's usually a little bit of both. And then once you get that solution up and running, we can easily expand it than the traditional methods by either you can expand it yourself, or you can contract with us from a workflow by workflow basis. And so today, it's that AP automation fast track solution that I'm going to demonstrate. Is just an example of how we can take that MetaViewer solution and apply it to the challenges of shuffling paper and really truly make you paperless. So everything centers around MetaViewer is that document management, content management, imaging type of solution. And you know, some other places that beyond invoices that people use it is HR, all the documents and processes over there, contracts, order processing. Just really, there's really whatever your imagination can think of as to where you have documents and processes that you want to be more efficient. MetaViewer can really help by implementing a solution for those purposes. But if I take that technology and apply it to the challenges of invoice processing and managing and getting a handle on all that paper, starts by capturing those documents as soon as they come into your organization, whether they be paper or electronic. And going back to our roots is that report capture system. One big differentiator for how we help companies is our focus on the electronic side of things. If you can start working with your vendors to have them email you invoices, rather than ship them in the old postal way, and then we can actually set MetaViewer up to watch that email box and automatically pull that document in, preserving the textual information that it contains and preventing the paper from ever happening. So we pull it in. We have developed a tool called Invoice Accelerator that it feeds directly into that tool, and that tool will intelligently read that document like you can and extract all the pertinent data. We use that data to index or identify what that document's all about in MetaViewer, which helps in searching and routing and those types of things. But then ultimately, since we're going to push that information up to NAV, it totally eliminates the manual data entry of that data in MetaViewer and in NAV, and so you really can get some efficiencies there. And so really, that's the ideal solution, because nobody has to open up mail, nobody scans anything in. We watch that email box, we pull in the attached PDF invoice, pull it in, read it, and extract the data and workflow it as appropriate, and then hand it off to Microsoft Dynamics NAV. So we also realize that it's probably not feasible that you're going to be able to get everything electronic, so we can work with paper documents as well. Using any kind of scanner or multifunctional copier device, you can scan paper documents into MetaViewer, but if you scan a document, it's just a picture. There is no text for us to extract out of that document. So as you can see by the diagram on the screen there, if we don't find any text, we run it through this extra step, scanning OCR. That just takes about a second or two when it comes in. And so what that technology does, OCR technology will look at the dots on the page, all the pixels, if you will. And any dots that are touching each other, the system determines, oh, that's a 6 or a 1 or a G, and essentially converts that picture back into text and feeds into that same tool, that Invoice Accelerator tool that we developed, to intelligently read and recognize that data and extract that information. So in either case, the paper or the electronic, we're going to use the same tool to intelligently read that document and extract that data. Once we've captured the document, we extract the data, it goes into workflow. Most people, when they think of workflow, they think of routing a document around from person to person, and that's a big part of MetaViewer's workflow, but we actually look at workflow a little bit more robust than that, and that if we can actually do things with those documents so people don't have to, that's where you really start to get your efficiency. So, you know, extracting the data out of the document, we do that in workflow. Once we've extracted that data, we can validate it. We can check against our system or against NAV to see if this is a duplicate invoice or something that's in either one of those locations. If we can validate data, like if we pulled the purchase order number off of the invoice, we could talk to NAV and pull back what's been received against that purchase order, so we can reconcile the document against that. We can pull back default account codes for the vendor. We can pull back, you know, are they a 1099 vendor, those types of things. We can pull all that stuff back in the terms and calculate due dates and help you prioritize your work. So when it comes to routing documents around in workflow, the fast track solution I mentioned in invoice processing really focuses on two broad areas, one being the non-PO invoices. Those get routed around for approvals and coding of the dimensions before we push that transaction over to NAV. Otherwise, the purchase order related invoices, most companies don't really want to route those around for approval. You certainly can if you'd like. But those usually we compare it to what's been received against that PO, we reconcile it, and then hand that transaction off. So as it relates to invoices, those are the workflows in the fast track. The same concepts that I'm going to show you today on those non-PO and PO workflows can really be applied to all those other areas for other applications of the product in different functional areas of your organization. Retrieval being the third aspect of the solution, that's really just giving everybody access to the documents when and where they need them. Nice thing for us is there's no software to load on everybody's workstation. We use a standard internet browser as a tool to talk to the MetaViewer server. Whether we install MetaViewer on your servers in your organization, we have a hosted data center that we could actually host your MetaViewer solution. And what we're seeing gain in popularity is Microsoft is really promoting cloud-based offerings for NAV and those types of things. So we're seeing more and more people move NAV to something like Azure or some other data center they're choosing. And so in those cases, we can actually install MetaViewer in those same locations, and then the two systems can talk together and participate in those workflows. So with our solution, that browser-based interface is mobile-friendly in that it will recognize what kind of device that you're accessing the documents on. So if you're on a phone and you access the document, the system will automatically adjust how it presents the data. So it can present the data in an easy format that on such a much smaller screen than in your desktops. I mean, if you're kind of like me, I get a little spoiled in the office because I've got two widescreen monitors that I can put stuff up on and multitask a little bit better that way. But obviously, when I don't have that much screen real estate on my little phone, I can't. I need the system to recognize that and display the information a little bit differently. So it's very easy to use on a mobile device as well. And then lastly, to kind of round out the complete solution, is our Vendor Portal. That is not part of the fast track solution. It is an optional component that we've had a few clients that have seen the need for. But MetaViewer provides you that great visibility to everything inside of your organization. Some organizations want to make a subset of that information available external to their organization. So vendors could log in, or customers could log into a portal, and then it syncs with your internal system, and depending on how the user logs in is what they have the right to see and do in the system. And so like a vendor could check the status of their invoice, maybe upload an invoice if they're a smaller vendor, or customers, they can see their invoices that you sent them, or if they want to submit a purchase order to buy something, they can do that through the portal, and so things like that. So that's really a good example of all the breadth of the product. Everything in this solution is all developed by us, and it's a total end-to-end solution where if you reach out to Michael and you say, hey, you know what, we'd really like to have MetaViewer talk to us a little bit more about doing this. He doesn't have to go and bring in about 5 different organizations to do everything for you. He can bring us in, and we can actually really help you bring your efficiencies. So with that, that's what, I'm going to actually leave my PowerPoint now, and I'm going to jump over to my virtual machine. Close that down. All right. So now we see my virtual machine here. I've got some documents sitting in a folder over down here on the left-hand side. I've actually got several different folders with documents in it. I'm going to kick off a task right now that's going to start watching that folder and then pull those documents in. Now, normally in a real-world environment, you're not going to have to kick tasks off like that. We schedule those to run every so often, and in a demo mode, I like to actually kick the task off so you can actually see things in that folder before I start. If that were running, obviously there wouldn't be anything in there. In this case, now that I kick that task off, you can see it pulled those documents in. They're going right into Invoice Accelerator, and we're going to start reading those documents and extracting the data. Now that I have that task running, if I saved a document to that folder or drag and drop a document to that folder, the system's going to automatically pull it in and process that one as well. Same thing with email. We can watch an email box and we can pull the documents out of email boxes too. If you set up multiple email boxes or multiple folders, depending on which folder or email box we pulled it out of, we can associate that with the appropriate company. So again, one less thing that the user has to worry about. It's going to come in, and we're going to know which company in NAV that applies to, and then we route and pull back the correct information accordingly. So if I open up my browser now, whoops, and I go into MetaViewer, a couple things here. First of all, we sync with Active Directory. And we work off of a roles-based system. So syncing with Active Directory really just means single sign-on. So when you go to the MetaViewer homepage, as I did here, it's going to authenticate who you are by how you logged onto that machine. So you don't have to remember that other username and password. You go right into the system. And then the roles-based aspect is that in MetaViewer, we set up various roles for the various capabilities that that allow people to do certain things. And so when you add a user to the system, you say, what is their role in the organization, or roles, and you can assign them to various roles, and that's what determines what they can see and do on MetaViewer here. So this particular user, my AP user, for example, I've given them access to several roles. I think in the fast track, I think there's like 10 or 12 different roles that we've built, and so you can, I think I've given them, this person, access to probably 7 or 8 of those, so they can see a lot of things on their home page. Now, on the roles-based aspect, you can actually build roles in MetaViewer that are this, and name them the same as your Active Directory group. So then anybody that's a member of a particular Active Directory group would be given the rights and permissions, just that easy as well. So this particular thing, if I look at what I've got on my home page here, the ones with the numbers after them, those are my work queues. My role says that when those things change from a 0 to a 4 or a 3 or a 7, that means there's something in there that needs my attention. I need to go in there and take care of that work. If it's a 0, I can ignore it. That means there's no documents in there. The ones without the numbers, those are more searches. Electronic file cabinet, if you will, like the search paid invoices. If I were to click on that, it actually would prompt me for what am I looking for? Vendor name, invoice number, payment number, whatever. And this is just some examples, but we can have different parameters here. You type in what you're looking for, and immediately there's the document. I don't have to walk down the hall and start digging in file cabinets trying to find that, or hunting around on people's desks to find anything. That complete visibility is all in the system. With either searches like that or my work queues. If it's on my desk, or this verification queue, then I know that I need to go in there and do something with that. So today what we're going to do is we're going to just follow these documents through a typical workflow and kind of show you how the views change for the different people, and different users have different looks and those types of things. So in our invoice processing workflow here, most documents, when they come in, either email or scanned or whatever, the first place you're going to see them in your organization is this verification queues up here. Non-PO verification, PO verification. I'm going to come back to those. What I want to focus on right now are these 3 documents that are sitting down here waiting for profile building. And I'm going to open those up in our Invoice Accelerator tool. And so when I open those up, the first time you get an invoice in from a vendor, it's going to come into Invoice Accelerator. It's going to intelligently read that document and extract the data. So you can see this one here, this rain projectors invoice on the left-hand side there. I see the data that we extracted. But the first time we get the invoice in, we want a human to look at it to make sure that we extracted everything correctly. If we made a mistake, we want that person to fix it so we don't keep making that same mistake over and over and over again. And while we're in here, we're actually going to, this is going to be our first touch point with Microsoft Dynamics NAV, to where we're actually going to go talk to the vendor card and pull back the vendor number from that vendor card too, so that in the future, not only am I going to extract data out of the document, but I'm also going to apply that vendor number to the document, so that when they go into workflow, we're going to use that vendor number to talk to the NAV to pull back the default account codes, what are their payment terms, and calculate due dates and all those types of things. So the way this solution works, right up top here, it says content identification, primary, secondary, miscellaneous. I want to grab something off of this document that uniquely makes this rain projectors invoice. Typical things that people use: zip codes, street addresses, phone numbers, fax numbers, email addresses, web addresses, things like that. A combination of a couple of those values would make it unique enough. And really how that gets used is when I finish this document, it's going to save those values I've chosen into our database. And so when invoices come in, we read all the words and we try to find a match in that content identification database. If we find a match, that's how we know somebody's already done this process. We extract the data according to that and then deliver that right into those verification queues. So if I move this out of the way here, those 7 documents that are in those 2 verification queues, those are examples that somebody's already done this before on those vendors. So that all got extracted and they're all ready to be processed. So in this process, what I do here, if I click on a primary, I'm going to just click on the document zip code, for example. When I do that, you can see it copies that value over to the primary. If I tab down, I'll draw a box around this 678 John Street is my address. When I do that, it grabs that value and puts that on the left-hand side as well. To vendor name, now I could pull that off of the invoice, but it may or may not be an exact match to how you refer to that vendor in NAV. So, and vendor number is probably not on the invoice at all. So I'm actually going to type a little bit of the vendor name here. I'll type RAIN, and then right up here I have a button that says, if I hover over it, it says perform data lookup, or F8, that would be my hotkey. If I click that or hit my F8 key, it makes a call to NAV, the vendor table over there, and finds a match. If I found multiple matches, I'd select the one I want. In this case, I only have the one, so I'm going to say select, and it's going to pull the vendor name and the vendor number back from NAV. And so in the future, anything that matches to this unique identifiers that I set up here, not only are we going to extract the data out of the document, but we're also going to assign the vendor name and number. So ways to integrate and pull back other information that we can use within the workflow process to help people prioritize their work. So the last part of this process is just look at how MetaViewer extracted the data and make sure we did so correctly. So I mentioned in the overview that the system is designed to read a document like you can. And really what I mean by that is if I gave any one of you an invoice and said, hey, tell me what the invoice number is, you would look for something like invoice number, invoice pound, invoice no. When you found that, you'd tell me what the value is right next to it. Well, that's exactly how Accelerator was designed. We have a pretty extensive library of all the common words used for the various fields. And so it starts reading that document looking for those. And in this case, since I'm highlighted on invoice number right now, you can see here highlighted in green, we found one of those anchor words called invoice pound. Because we found it, we grabbed this 1981518, copied that, and automatically filled that in on the left-hand side for the invoice number field. So really my job is just tab through these to make sure they're all correct. So you can see there's where we found the date. PO number, here's a typical kind of correction that I make. In this case, we found the anchor word of PO pound, but instead of looking below, it looked to the right, which obviously is incorrect. So I'm going to grab a yellow highlighter, and I'm going to draw a box underneath that PO pound. When I do that, the system's going to say, oh, when I find this anchor word, I'm going to look below in the future here. So it's really just correcting the system like that, and then once I finish this, it won't make that mistake again. Invoice subtotal, you can see where we found that. Tax, I'll draw a yellow box right down here for that. Discount, freight, it found the freight all by itself. Miscellaneous is something else we look for. An invoice amount, you can see where it found that as well. So with that, I can finish this document. I click Finish. It's going to save those unique values into our database, so the next RAIN projector's invoice that comes in is going to get processed automatically. Now, we can also adjust other things to extract other things out of the invoice, but for example, as I mentioned in the overview, this fast track is kind of a way to get you up and running faster. So these are the common things that most companies have asked us to put in. If you didn't want some of them, like miscellaneous amount or something like that, we can remove those, or we can certainly add other values. Now, that last one I went through slow just to explain the process. As you can imagine, this is one of the first things we're going to teach a few people in your organization to do. And so with that proper training, it'll take somebody about 15 seconds to do one of these. If I do this one a little bit faster, I'm going to click on primary here. I'm going to click on the zip code, tab down, secondary. I'll draw a box around that one drop lane. Come down here, type a little bit of the vendor name, hit my F8 key to look up into NAV. I find my match. I pull that back. There's the vendor number. Invoice number, yep, that looks good. Date looks good. PO number, I'm going to make that same correction. I'm going to say, hey, look below there. Invoice subtotal, you can see it found that right there. Tax, that would be right here. Shipping, right there. And then total due, it found that all by itself. So with that, I'd be done, right? So pretty quick and easy to do this. Now, I'm going to finish this document, and right now we're on document 2 of 3. And I purposely pulled in 2 Waterworks invoices because what's going to happen here, when I finish this document and it saves these unique values into the system, as soon as the next document loads, it's going to try to find a match against that system, and it's going to find that this profile that we just built, and it's going to process that next document all automatically without having to stop on the document. So with that, if I say finish and say OK, just that way it says, now do you want to review some more? It actually processed that 3rd document just that quickly. So until if that vendor changed their invoice format, because we're working off of those anchor words, if they just move the data around on the page, we'll still be able to find it. If they dramatically change their invoice format and we miss some values, the system will know that. It'll kick it back out. You'll adjust it for that vendor again, and then and it'll be good until they change that format again. Okay, so I'm going to close that down. If I refresh my browser window now, those 3 documents that were sitting in profile building have now been moved up into the verification queue. So before we had 3 non-POs and 4 POs, now we have 5 of each. So 2 went to the non-PO and 2 went to PO verification. So let's click on this non-PO verification and let's follow these documents through the process. So when I do that, this verification queue, this is the equivalent of that person who just opened up the mail. They got this big stack of invoices in front of them. They look at the first one and say, oh, I want Joe to look at that. Oh, I want Sally to look at this one. And then they walk it down the hall and give that information out to those people. In this case, one of the advantages of MetaViewer is I have an electronic stack. If I click on that verification queue, I see a summary of everything that's in that pile. I can resort these by clicking on any of the headers and sort low to high, click it again, and sorts high to low. As a user, I can reorganize what this view looks like for me. So if I wanted company name over here on the left for some reason, I could pull that over there. I can make that a little bit wider. If I wanted to hide fields, I could come in here and say, whoops, I can say, you know, a creation date, I don't really care to see that. I'm going to uncheck that. And so my browser will remember my preferences. So the next time I come in here, my stack is going to be exactly the way that I want it, sorted and organized and everything else. So let's just open up some documents here and process a few of these just to see how the workflow works. So I look at this document here, right? So this is the Sweet Oranges group invoice that comes in. In the upper left-hand corner is the data that we extracted with Accelerator. In addition, from the time it left Accelerator to the time it showed up over here, we went to talk to NAV and pull back some other information. Things like the payment terms and their discounts. And with that, we can calculate a due date, a discount date, early pay discount. Are they a 1099 vendor, yes or no? And so we can account for that in a workflow. So we extracted that information. Below the invoice is the grid for keying in the dimensions. My particular system, obviously this varies from client to client because everybody uses a little bit different dimensions. My system, I have main account, business unit, and department as my dimensions. And so the user can code this information in. If you have default set up in your NAV system or some other table, we can actually pre-populate this with the defaults for that vendor. And we do that in various ways. Sometimes it's by the invoice type, and sometimes it's by the vendor and those types of things. But if I were going to key this in myself, I can click on something like main account. Now, I don't have to remember all the codes. I can actually type in the first few characters of an account, and then it makes a call to the chart of accounts within NAV and shows me a list of account codes that begin with those first 3 characters. So you can see here it returns my list. I can actually continue typing until I get to the one I want, 130, or I could have just selected from the list as well. I tab off, and based on the rules of that main account, the available business units I only have one business unit that's available. So this is actually looking at NAV and validating as we go along here to only give me valid choices. So I can't miscode this department. I've got a few more select choices there. So we'll select that, and I'll say $80,000. Okay. When I tab off, it automatically creates a new line because the invoice is for $89,510.40, and I've only keyed 80,000 so far. So this makes sure that I key enough pieces of information. Now, main account. Let's say I'm a user and I don't really know the name of the numbers very good. I can actually type in a description as well. So if I type in cost of goods sold, COGS, it shows me all the available codes that have those values in it as well. So I'm going to just select this one, tab off, 069, and we'll do 025, and we'll do the balance, 95.10.40. Right? Now I'm tied out. The way the fast track solution works is non-PO invoices, this approval required field in the upper left-hand corner here, is set to yes. That means I need to select who I want this to go to. So approver primary, I can click a drop down and see a list, or if I just start typing a name, it automatically shrinks that list just like that account code did until I get to the one I want. I can give this to Joe. I say coded, immediately it's sent to Joe and put in his queue. I don't have to walk it down the hall and give it to him. I don't have to scan it and email it to him. I don't have to do any of that. The system takes care of that. It's immediately in his queue. Now, another thing that we do with the fast track is we can send emails to people to let them know something needs their attention. In the fast track solution, we felt it was best practices not to send an email for every invoice that comes in. That gets to be a little overbearing and kind of loses its efficiency. So instead, what we do is we immediately send it to Joe. If sometime during the day he goes in there and approves his invoices, he's not going to get an email from MetaViewer. At the end of the day, we're going to check everybody's queue. And anybody that's got invoices in their queue is going to get an email from MetaViewer that says you've got X number of invoices to process, and we're going to give them a little hyperlink right in the body of that email. They click it, it fires up their browser, takes them right to their queue so they can approve those invoices. The other things we can do with email notification is if you had backup approvers, if it sat in somebody's queue too long, we can send an email to the backup approver or urgent approver or things like that too, to really make sure that nothing gets stalled out in the process. So I'm going to just key a few more documents here. We'll assign that to Joe. Main account 500-130, tab off. Business unit, in this case, in this particular company, I have more selections for that main account for business unit. So we'll say 006, and we'll tab off 027, tab off 70,000, tab off 500, 120, 006, 027, and $3,500. Right? I'm going to say coded, and we're going to send that one to Joe as well. Now, a couple other panes in the window here is this area here called with the add button. That's a place, we call that our invoice journal. That's a place where people can actually enter notes and collaborate on a document as it flows through the organization. So if I say add, I enter a note. I'll just type in a little garbage there. When I add that note, it stamps my username and the date and time that I created that note. We actually also use this area to automatically add entries. Every time a person clicks one of the buttons on the document, reprocess, coded, reject, we're going to automatically add an entry in here as to who did that. So when we see these invoices downstream, you're going to see coded by AP user, approved by Joe, approved by Sally, final reviewed by AP user, and so on. So you're going to see that history. And when you're looking at that transaction over in NAV, and then you open up the document, you're actually going to see where it's all been. You know all that information. You don't have to go hunting around for who approved it or anything like that. The bottom pane on the window here, it says supporting documents. The system is smart enough that it actually can automatically link other documents that you might want to see that are already in the system when the invoice comes in. And so you can see this view supporting documents. It's got a little 1 after it. That says show me all the documents in the system that match this document either by invoice number, vendor number, or purchase order number, all the supporting documents in the system. And so in this case, since I've got one, if I click it, it opens up that document. If I had multiple, if I had 2 or 3, it would actually show me a list, and I could pick which document I want. So here's a good example. If you captured all your W-9s into MetaViewer in an electronic file cabinet form, then when you click that link, you can actually see that there's a W-9 for this vendor. And if the other 2 buttons in this window, attach a W-9 or attach a supporting document, that allows me to add another supporting document into the system. It passes me the data that invoice is already indexed on, so we can index that supporting document as well. I can select what type. Is it a bill of lading, a purchase order, W-9, and then I browse and find that document and then attach that into the system. And so if it was like a W-9 and it was indexed on vendor number, every future invoice that comes in for that vendor is going to be associated with that document as well. So I'm going to assign this one to Joe. Oops, I didn't code it. So that's a good thing. So we actually got rules built into these fields. If certain fields are required. In this particular case, I didn't code anything, so it didn't let me route that to Joe. So I'm going to come in here and put an account code in there and tab off. And business unit. Actually, my rules say that I'm not required to enter a business unit and department. My business units or my rules in NAV. So I'm going to leave those blank just to demonstrate that. 481250. We'll keep this whole amount just to save time. And now I say coded. It releases out of this and brings up the next document. So we routed some things to Joe. So let's go look at Joe. Joe logs in. Oops. Oops, I think why is that not? I clicked on the wrong one. That's why. I'm trying to go into the wrong system here. There we go. All right, so I log in as Joe. Joe's role says that he's not authorized to see as many things in MetaViewer, so he's got his approval queues, and he can do a little light-duty searching, and that's it. He doesn't have as many rights as my AP user. So here's his approvals with the 3 documents that we routed to him. I'm going to open that up. Datum receivers, rain projectors, sweet oranges. Let's open this datum receivers. Same thing as the verification queue. He could reorganize the way things look in that list view, and then this way he's looking at the document. So not only does his role determine what he sees on his home page, it also determines what he's authorized to do with the document when working with it. So in the upper left-hand corner, where that data that we extracted, we made most of that stuff read-only. So he can't change the vendor name or vendor number, invoice number, or any of that information. He's not authorized to do that. Even the grid, we've made this read-only as well. And then if he wanted it recoded, he can click a button that says recode. He puts in the reason as to why he wants it recoded. It's going to take that note and put it in the journal area over here and then send it back to the coder. So in this journal, you can see this is the one we added that note, coded and verified with data and receivers by AP user, and so on. When Joe approves this, he'll actually stamp that he approved it in there. So just a way to automatically have that audit trail of where that document's been. Now, some organizations, the approvers are the ones that do the coding. So in that case, we can actually make this grid editable like it was in the first step, and then maybe turn off the grid on that first step. So really, those are the kinds of changes that we work with you, is to say, how is your business process maybe a little bit different than the way the system is set up out of the box, and then we make those adjustments. Some of those are all pretty easy. Some we can get as fancy as you like and do all kinds of tremendous things. In this case, Joe reviews this. He clicks the approve button. It then goes back to AP for final review before we push that transaction over to NAV. In this case, the other buttons that an approver has the ability to do is all the things he'd have if he was looking at a paper document. He can approve it and walk it back down the hall and give it to AP. In this case, he doesn't have to walk it anywhere. He can just click the approve. It goes right back to AP, and immediately they have it. Approve escalate if he thinks he approves this, but he wants his boss to look at it as well, he can click the drop down, change his name to his boss, and say approve escalate, and then that releases to Sally as opposed to going to AP. Now, that's one of the common things that people ask us is, hey, we've got our certain business rules that every invoice, if it's over a certain dollar amount or whatever your business rules are, can the system automatically pick the next approver? And the answer is yes. The default system here, like I'm demonstrating, probably wouldn't have that built in because we don't really know what your rules are when we install the base system. But if you can help us build a table or some kind of rules that determine where this needs to go to next, instead of, you can get rid of this approve escalate button and you can click approve, and then instead of going to AP automatically, it's going to go to a workflow step that we compare that document and all its data to your business rules to determine who needs to see this next, and then automatically escalate it to that person. All right. Other buttons, reject and reassign. Reject basically would prompt me for a reason, and you know, I don't want to pay this for some reason. Reassign, that would I can actually, if I don't know what this is for, I can give it to somebody else by selecting their name, or if I said unknown and say reassign, it takes it out of my queue, and in that case, if I picked a person, it would go to that person. In this case, since I said unknown, it's going to go back, oops, back to my AP person, which is right here, this assigned approver with the one document. If I look at where all those other documents went, non-PO final review, that's the one that got approved and is waiting for AP to look at it before we push it over to NAV. Out for approval, 2 documents. That's the one that we escalated to Sally, plus this one that we reassigned. Technically, it's still out for approval. We just don't know who we want to approve it yet. So AP goes in there. They open that document up. They look at it. They can see here reassigned to unknown by Joe. That automatically got entered in there. So he's going to, you can give it to Sally, click assign. It's sent to Sally. If I log in as Sally now, she's got her approval queue. She goes in there, opens that Rain Projectors invoice, and you can see here approved with 73.5, escalated to Sally by Joe. She can review it. She can do the same things that Joe can, approve, escalate, reassign, reject, recode, etc. She says approve. It goes to AP for final review, and so on. So really this concept, again, we're talking about an invoice processing scenario, but as you can imagine, this is just really passing documents around without having to walk them around and make photocopies of them and all those kinds of things. So this really applies to just about any business practice, whether you want just the documents and what data that you want for users to see, and then routing those around. So if I go back to my AP user here, whoops, wrong one. I want that button. I have now 2 in this final review. So this gives AP one last chance to complete the workflow here. They can actually open those documents up. They can see who coded it, who approved it, what notes did they enter, all that stuff. If they think this is good, they can click the export, and we're going to pass that over to NAV. If they wanted to reassign it or send it back up to the approver, they could add a note, give it to that, send it back up to that person, or change the name. They want to send it to somebody else, click reassign, and so on. I'm going to say export, and we'll export that one as well. If I go back to my home page, those have been released from the final review. Now those are actually in waiting for ERP export non-PO. And the vision, what we do is when we see documents in there, we're actually going to take data, the header level information, all the GL information, and we're going to pass that over to an intermediate table that resides in your NAV system. And then your partner will actually help map that data into the appropriate places within NAV, and then you complete that transaction for payment. Once that information gets uploaded, if I refresh now that I've talked here a little bit, maybe they're gone. Nope, not yet. They're going to actually get moved down into this waiting for payment info from ERP. Once they've been successfully handed off to that intermediate table in NAV, we're going to actually put them in a workflow step that we periodically ping NAV to say, hey, do you have any payment information on this transaction? So I can pull that payment information back, and then I can actually execute a search, like this search paid invoices, for example, and I can say I don't really know a payment number. Well, here, let's just do a blank search here. And then I can find my information. So here's a payment number of 387. If I were to go back to that search and I put in 387 as my payment number, it then finds the documents that were paid with that payment number and so on. So allows me to not only process that document, but any future information that gets applied in once we hand it over to NAV, we can also apply that information as well. So now when I came back to my home screen here, you can see now I've got those two documents have successfully been pushed over, and they're waiting for that payment information. Now on the PO side, we do things a little bit different in the workflow. As I said in the overview, most people don't really want to route invoices or purchase order invoices around for approval. They just basically want to compare those to what's been received against those purchase orders in NAV. So in this case, if I open this one up, for example, the grid looks a little bit different. Instead of worrying about the dimensions, because all that's tied to the purchase order in NAV, we're not really concerned about the dimensions. We're more concerned about what's been received. So we take that purchase order number, we talk to NAV, and pull back what's been received. So you can see here all the items have been received. In the bottom right, I have a difference of $0. That means everything matches. This invoice matches everything we received. I say reconciled, and that goes to final review so they can be pushed up to Navision. Again, here's another one, fewer items, difference of 0. I can say reconciled on that. And then here's one, here's where I do have a difference. So in this case, if I looked at this invoice, it's for 171 of these wiring harnesses. Looks like I've got various receipts of those wiring harnesses. I've received more than I'm getting invoiced for. So I can either use the trash can to remove lines that don't apply to this invoice, or I can actually select multiples and then say delete selected rows. Yes. Now I'm not deleting them from NAV, I'm just deleting them because we pulled these back from NAV to apply to this invoice. Well, since they don't apply to this invoice, I'm removing them and I'm saying these are the only lines that apply to this invoice. Now I'm reconciled. I say reconciled, and it hands that down to final review. So PO final review, I've got 3 documents sitting in there. So just like the non-PO, I can click on that queue and look at those documents. If I decided I didn't want to open all these up and look at them all, I could actually put buttons, just like on the document screen. I could put buttons across this list view. I could select all the ones that I want, and then I can say export. Remember this selection so I don't get prompted again, and then I can push all those over to Navision as well. So that you can see those are sitting in that waiting for ERP export PO and have been pushed over. So if I go look at my ERP now, actually in my demo VM I don't have NAV running in here, so I actually picked a VM that I actually have Microsoft Dynamics AX running in. So that's where those documents got pushed over. By the end of the year, I do intend to update my VM to load NAV and have the fast track that we use for NAV installed in a different VM, so I could actually show Navision. But the concept is really the same. Everything is going to talk to the Navision and pull back the dimensions and route them around and reconcile against the POs, and then we push those transactions up. So in AX here, for example, here's where I push those 2 transactions over. If I were to dig into this particular one, I could see those lines, and instead of me having to manually enter all that data, we pushed the transaction over here, and it's all already filled out for you. And then you would post this through just like you would any other transaction. And then we could actually even in AX here, we actually can have a link to the document up here on the menu. I click that, it feeds me data from that screen and then shows the associated document here in the window. Now Navision does it a little bit different, but the same kind of concept. We can create a URL that basically gives us data from that screen. Embedded in that URL is a link in NAV, and when you click it, it's actually going to kick off that URL and then show the matching document. So this is kind of nice because I can, when it opens this document, I can see where it all went, who all had all that information. I should have all the information that I need to schedule this transaction for payment, and that's it. All right. The last thing I want to talk about before we open it up for questions is reporting. Now, our system uses all standard tools, so all of the data, the header, the grid, all that information we keyed in on the document or the information we extracted, all that is stored in SQL. So it lends itself nicely to be able to report against that information. And in MetaViewer, if you have something like SQL Server reporting services installed with a report server or something like that, you can actually put links to SQL reports right on a user's home page. So, and given their role, I've got a user that I did such. I created a few reports, a dashboard report, an invoice accrual report, in that when I click on this invoice accrual, for example, it's going to run a report that actually shows me all the invoices that are in MetaViewer that have not been handed off to NAV yet. And so when I do that, you can see here I've got a bunch of different documents. I've got $103,949 worth of invoices that are still out for approvals or somewhere in the process. I can see the step name that they're in, where they're at. If I wanted to see one of those documents, like this Sweet Oranges, for example, I can click on View Invoice. It opens that document up. I can actually click on it, and I can see where that's at. So it was assigned to Sally Approver. It's sitting in Sally's queue. I know exactly where that document is. So the reporting, really, the reporting is really not a function of MetaViewer. That function is, like I said, in my demo VM here, I'm using SQL Server reporting services, and so some reports and put those into that server. So you could actually put links to your AX reports. If you wanted to run a specific report, you could run that from your MetaViewer homepage as well. And we can either build these reports for you. Your partner is certainly can certainly write reports for you, and then so we have some clients that actually want to write their own reports, and so we talk to them about what are the pertinent tables in MetaViewer that have that good data, the data that they would want to report on, and then they can build those reports. All right, so that's the solution. So we capture documents, we workflow documents around, we extract the data, we workflow them around, making sure everybody needs to see them. We upload the documents, interacting with Navision throughout the process, and then we can link back to the documents from other systems like NAV or like a report or those various items to be able to link those documents to those other places as well. So really, that's the solution. As you can imagine, as we talked about, we work through the invoice processing role, but all those other applications, same kind of concepts. We can capture documents, we can extract the data, workflow it, and share that information, whether they're HR or orders, or on the order processing side, or AR, those types of things. Customer service is a big thing. And then your roles in the organization will determine what you have the rights to see. So I can keep HR and AP documents all in the same system, but only people who are authorized to see the HR documents have shortcuts to be able to see that information. And likewise, anybody that's only responsible for AP stuff can only see the AP stuff, and so on. All right. So with that, I'm actually going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull back up my slide, and I'm going to put this up here. So that really concludes my presentation. I will see if any questions came in. If not, you can certainly ask those through the question feature of the GoToWebinar. Otherwise, you can certainly reach out to Michael, and he will get us in touch, or info@metafile.com. You can shoot us an email and let us know how else we can help you. You know, we can talk to you one-on-one with your organization. We can set up a web demo to do kind of what I did today with you and your organization. And in that case, because it's not a national webinar, we can actually have you live on the phone, and you can ask questions as we go through. So that's always a good way to go too. But Michael, any questions that came in, or did I do a really good job?
Nothing has come in, so you have done a wonderful job. And you know, I'm always impressed at how well MetaViewer is at extracting the data from the documents. It's very impressive.
Yep,
So
it does do a really good job.
yeah, but let me say thanks to you, and we appreciate you doing this. And you can see Doug's information on the screen if you need to get a hold of him, or I will put my information up right now.
There you go.
And if you have any questions, get a hold of me. Once again, I want to thank Doug, and we definitely appreciate it. So on that note, have a great day, everyone.
All right, thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Doug. Bye.